إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ادعوا إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن إن ربك هو عالم بمن ضل عن سبيله وهو عالم بالمهتدين. Call unto the way of thy Lord with wisdom and goodly exhortation, and argue with them in a way that is best. Surely thy Lord knows who has strayed away from his way, and he also knows who are rightly guided. There's another verse I'd like to recite before I get into my topic. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. قل يا أيها الناس إني رسول الله إليكم جميعا الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض لا إله إلا هو يحيي ويميت فآمنوا بالله ورسوله النبي الأمي الذي يؤمن بالله وكلماته واتبعوه لعلكم تهتدون. Say, O mankind, truly I am a messenger to you all from Allah, to whom belongs the kingdom of the heavens and the earth. There is no God but He. He gives life and He causes death. So believe in Allah and His messenger, the Prophet, the Immaculate One, who believes in Allah and His words, and follow Him that you may be rightly guided. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Sadr Sahib, Imam Sahib, brothers and sisters. The topic of peace has been addressed through the Holy Quran, has been addressed numerously before, and the previous speech was the climax to it all. So I'm going to push this envelope a little further in another direction, so bear with me. The reason I'm doing that is there is an audience, an emerging audience in the Ahmadiyya Jamaat, by the grace of Allah, that meet with people that matter in the sense of the government, in the sense of policymakers and legislators. While our meeting with them is sound and proper, but it needs to be addressed in a way that they can ingest information from us. They can take that information and apply it. The reason I'm saying that is that when I noticed that the government was looking for input from the Muslim world, and this is how our government works, that when there is a policy to be made, whether it's social or legislative policy to be made, they look for input, and they are least concerned about who the input comes from. It could be Muslim scholars or it could be any type of people. And yet when they looked for, and this is before the Gulf War and afterwards and the other wars that we've been through, there was hardly any scholarship done by the Muslim community. It just shattered my confidence in Muslim scholarship to be able to find nothing out there that would have met with the basic and the most rudimentary levels of standards or standards of scholarship. So I'm going to take you there and what it takes to get there. So bear with me as we go along. And if you think that this is not for you, then there is a growing cadre of young people who are emerging and who need this stuff and who need this type of information. So we are talking about research through the Holy Quran, peace through the Holy Quran, research and publications, and taking it to them. And I will leave it for you to think and imagine who them are. As I said, Muslim scholarship is anecdotal, and there's hardly any worth the name. Peacemaking based on foreign policy initiatives depends on published research using scientific or rather intellectually persuasive arguments. I'm going to use the word scientific quite a lot, so don't be overwhelmed by it. It's just simple. It's measurement. In Surah Rahman, Allah says, Ar-Rahman allama al-Qur'an, khalaqa al-insana allamahu al-bayan, ash-shamsu wal-qamaru bihusbani wal-najmu wash-shajaru yasjudan, was-samaa'a rafa'aha wa waza'a al-mizana, Allah tadghaw fil mizan, wa aqimul wazna bil qisti, wa la tuqsirul mizan. So the basic thing, the basic principle God has laid in the entire universe is the principle of balance, and I am going to focus my speech around the principle of balance, which is the principle of peace. Anytime you tilt that balance, you tilt peace. That's simple. But scientific terminology today talks of science, and God Almighty says there are things you know and there are things you don't see. And it's important, it's an attribute of a Muslim to see and to believe in the things that are not seen. So while we talk about tangible sciences such as medicine and physics and astronomy, and we have been talking of them today, the more important sciences that meet the gist of human effort are behavioral sciences, psychological sciences, sciences that we shy away from. And they have become quantitative in nature. And the basic quantity is expressed in Surah Rahman, Allah tadghaw fil mizan. Now, Muslim published works are substandard, as I said. They're not translated. You can go to any library, worth the name, Ivy League or not. And not accepted for ingress into the libraries or journals. They're not accepted by the libraries. You'll go there and you won't find them. They're not even worth the name. So when time comes to gain insight into what Islam has to offer on social, political, and economic issues, there is nothing for the architects of politics and sociology and government and legislation. Thus, there is a need for Ahmadiyya scholarship to write and to publish the teachings of the Holy Quran on peace. Now, the best published works are, and I'm going to quote them as I go through my speech. I just mentioned what to me appealed to be the best that will take you there, and one of them was Islam's response to contemporary issues. So I've drawn a lot from there, but I'll talk of things that really take you in that direction of research and scholarship. One of the requirements is therefore a good background in college, writing and research. That's very important. Experience in teaching and research is also important. Basic methodology of science is important. The focus of peacemaking in Islam needs a number of disciplines. Today, science is not just biology or physics. It's biology and psychology. It's neurology and deviant behavior. All those are combined. These are called multidisciplinary approaches to the study of human behavior. Now, peacemaking, basically, where's that thing I wanted? It's there, it's too far. I won't be able to write and go up there, but anyway, I'll have to walk up there, and I hope the camera's focus is on that because I'll be writing some things up there. So I hope you're quickly able to move up there and take it down. Now, first is the unity of God. And I would need something to be able to express my voice there until that comes. The unity of God, the concept of unity of God. Now, although I'm not a mathematician and neither I expect any one of you to be a mathematician, the concept of unity of God is one. Yes.
Use the PowerPoint. This is the remote.
No, I'm not using the PowerPoint. I'm using this. Thank you. Jazakallah. And you may remove that background there. The unity of God, the concept of unity of God is basically expressed in one. And the opposite of one is zero. And so X could be, in any case, any number. X could be 1, or anything between 0 and 1. That's the first concept. Remember that 1 is the identity figure. 1 is identity. Mathematically speaking, if you take 1, x representing any number, and multiply by 1, it's x times 1, which is x. But if you have, instead of x, if you have 0, x times 0 would be 0. So in order to reflect true identity of a human person or society, it has to be one. Belief in the ultimate one. But everything ranges between 0 and 1. That's another thing you would want to know. Everything is between 0 and 1. So you can express a million in terms of anything like 0.00001, or that's another thing. Number 2, remember that anything to the power of 0, x to the power of 0 is what? Anybody? X to the power of 0 is 1. How do you prove that? Let's say x to the power of 2 over x to the power of 2, and when you divide exponents, you subtract them. X to the 0 minus 2 is x to the 0. On the left side, x to the 0 over 0, or x to the 2, and x to the 2 equals 1. The good thing about it is that when a man subjects himself to 0, and there is no ego, and then replaces that entity with the entity of God, then that person becomes the entity of reflection of God on earth. So the true identity is taqwa. That is when you put yourself entirely to taqwa. Okay? And then you can have a number of exponential rules of exponents or equations. So that's one part of it. The other part of it, clean that please. The other part of it is probability. The other thing that you should know in the advanced sciences is that everything is expressed in terms of probability. I see heads shaking. And that's what I want you to know, that this is something up your alley, young people. So you have to step forward and try to take these concepts of Islam and then translate them. And that's the whole purpose of my presentation today. How you take the concepts of the Holy Quran, translate them into something that is testable, because God says there is a measure that He has created. Use the concept of an equation. What is an equation? An equation is a state of equilibrium, right? It's the state of rest. But that's where peace is, folks. So let's say, simple thing, y equals mx plus b. And I must have read that 30, 40, 50 years ago. What is that? That is the equation for a line, right? Y equals mx plus b. But what about the equation? The equation says that anything you do on the right, you should do on the left. That is what justice is about. Justice is about an equation. An equation is the state of equilibrium. And Allah says, I have created everything in a state of equilibrium. That is Sifat-e-Rahmaniyat. We came into this world, we have already got everything that we wanted, already created for us. We didn't have to do anything about it. And that was Sifat-e-Rahmaniyat. So Sifat-e-Rahmaniyat means that things are there, and then when you start to disturb, let's say ecology, you start to disturb the equilibrium, what happens? Let's say there's a lot of pollution. Pollution has disturbed the equilibrium. So let's suppose you move something from here. I'm going to give you an example. Minus b. So you take away b from there, so mx minus b. What do you do to the other side of the equation? Minus the b from the other side. So if you do pollution in the world, or take the case of a contract. A contract is also an equation. I give you $10, what do you owe me? That should equal. And if you don't, then we have a problem. And that's where the equilibrium gets disturbed. And that not only happens in the world of politics, international law, medicine. My medicine should equal my disease. If it is less, I'll have disease. If it is more, I'll have some other disease. So all that is based on this concept of equilibrium, loudly proclaimed in the Holy Quran. Don't disturb it. Then the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, every night a Muslim should go to sleep, should recite the words, Rabbana ma khalaqta hadha batilan, subhanaka, faqina azaban nar. That is a negative hypothesis. So science deals with the subject of hypotheses. So P sub 1 equals, in this case, 0. Ma khalaqta hadha batila. Batila is 0. There's nothing out there. That the moon wasn't created for a purpose, that you and I weren't created, medicine wasn't created for a purpose. And that, God says, you repeat it over and over again, you test it over and over again, and you will find it to be not true. Rabbana ma khalaqta hadha batilan. So now I have told you some basic concepts of mathematics as they apply to the Holy Quran. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that if you start reading the Holy Quran and you start talking about its teachings and you want to bring them to the level of scholarship that is acceptable internationally or globally or in the government or anywhere else at the university level, you got to start talking in their language. You can't talk Arabic to these people. They would need a translator. And if your scholarship in Ahmadiyya doesn't meet the standards of acceptability, your books won't be in the libraries. You won't have the advisory capacity to influence lawmaking, to influence sociologists. These sciences really matter. And we shy away from them. We'd rather study medicine than we study human behavior and what causes and disturbs human behavior. My God, I'll tell you, there is so much of waiting out there in the real world of sciences that these sciences over the years have really been soundly criticized for not having kept up to the standards of scholarship that were expected to remove from the society things such as evil, crime. The criminal justice system in America has been repeatedly claimed to be a total loss, in spite of all the PhDs and all the billions of dollars of research that have gone into the system over the century. So, what do we do? There was a time, folks, when this was not allowed, that the concept of yuminuna bil ghaib, things that are not seen, including the concept of God, was not allowed on campuses. No. They said, you can't see God, therefore you are not going to be allowed to talk about God. We only talk of things that are tangible, testable. But no, that's not true. This came just about the time when Huzur Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahimullah wrote the book Revelation and Reality. That book just about the time was about the time when there was a guy in London whose name was Templeton. Lord Templeton came up with a prize which is bigger than the Nobel Prize. And that prize was Templeton Prize, $2 million, just to bring God back into the equation of sciences. And that's what I'm going to do today. Okay? Are you with me? All right. Moving on. Our responses to some of the criticisms, and I'm going to talk about some of the criticisms now. So take in mind those criticisms. And some of them would come from scientific research, and some of them would come from historical research. And you've got to learn how to do it right. Some are rhetorical, but you don't need rhetorics in sciences. You need actual scientific data. Okay, criticisms. Jihad. You talk of Islam as the religion of peace. How come jihad? Jang-e-Badr, Jang-e-Uhud, Jang-e-Khandaq. You got to have an answer for that. And you just can't come up with an answer like "Uzina alladhina yuqatiluna bi annahum zulimu." You just can't stop there. They will listen to you, stop for a moment, and move on, and then push you aside. What you really want to do is something more tangible, something that meets the standards of modern science to be able to convince them that this is what it means, and that requires historical research. Think about it. Think about it. Folks, you got to think about it. Today, this country believes in that. It's the cornerstone of our constitutional right. The right to defend yourself. Now you're talking. Now you're talking their language. It's one of the fundamental principles of American law to be able to defend your home with the amount of force that is required. Again, justice equation that is inflicted on you. The castle, the doctrine of castle defense. If you take these approaches, you will find that every one of the principles enunciated in the Holy Quran are, after 1400 years, afterwards, have now been inducted and ingrained in modern society. You don't have much to do in that case. What you want to do is take their perspective, their approach, and develop something which we call critical thinking. Critical thinking is being able to, let's say, in critical thinking means something that you don't accept. Okay, Jamaat-e-Ahmadiyya says that, but you have to say, I've got to prove it. You don't say the Muslims say that. You don't say the Holy Quran says that. Yes, we know we do. But who is the audience? The audience don't want to accept that perspective, so you need to have some audience, some argument, some conviction, some proof, some measured approach to be able to convince them. They are looking for data. They are looking for something scientific. And if you don't give it to them, push it aside. We don't need it here. We won't even accept it in our libraries, what to talk of reading. But if you do, they will get to it. They will read it. And they will act upon it because that's their approach. When they're formulating a policy between the Israelis and the Palestinians, they're looking for data. They're looking for facts. They are looking for people who can deliver. They are looking for people who talk their language to approach, why is it that it happened this way? And unless you do that, my 5 minutes, just about 5 minutes. I mean, time passes so fast. I didn't even get started yet. I've got 10 pages to go. Well, I'm used to 3-hour lectures, but they wouldn't want to give it to me, but that's about it. Okay. Having thought about that, I'll come to something as to why it is happening today. Remember, I recited the 2 verses. Ud'u ila sabila rabbika bil hikmati. Ud'u ila sabila rabbika bil hikmati wal mu'izati al hasana. This falls under that category. You have to use wisdom to be able to now convince people. That's another part of wisdom. That's goodly exhortation. We have been missing on that point, and I think it's time for us to find out how to be able to do it. Number 2, remember the other verse I said, Qul ya ayyuhan nasu inni rasulullahi ilaykum jami'an. Now, when the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came in, he was asked, Qul ya ayyuhan nasu. Tell ya ayyuhan nasu, tell the whole world. Where was the whole world then? Not even Arabia was well known. Means of transmission and communication and travel were not known. So obviously it had to come to a time. This fulfillment, the fulfillment of this verse needed a time, and such as our time, when the means of communication were enough to transmit that message globally. So this is وَآخَرِينَ مِنْهُمْ لَمَّا يَلْحَقُوا بِهِمْ. This is the time of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's second appearance in the mirror image of the promised Messiah alayhi salatu wasalam. And as we go through, and as people try to criticize, where is that Islamic society? I'll conclude by saying, it's you. That Islamic society that truly practices, on whom you can really do the experimentation and loudly proclaim that this is Islam, and we have practiced it, and we have attained peace through it, then you are talking about applying the methods of science, and there are plenty of them, and my job isn't to talk about them, on the Ahmadiyya society. Because beyond this, beyond Khilafat-e-Ahmadiyyat, there is nothing out there that will tell you that Islam's practices are worth being followed. Islam.